attend our session today on building capacity around compliance and supporting our English learners in this new world that we're all trying to navigate. And I particularly want to thank Theresa and our Sanger team for their willingness to lead this session. We've partnered with Sanger now over the last 3 years, and we've just been so privileged to see the strength of this collaboration and the capacity that we've built over time, and to learn so much from you, Theresa, and your team. And so thank you is really all I'm here to say. And I also just want to say thank you to some of our partners who are on here as well. I see Mandy Gonzalez from Palm Springs Unified. I know we have folks from Glendale Unified and Santa Maria Bonita, Connecting Waters Charter School. I'm seeing so many of our partners on, and the genesis of this conversation really came out of a webinar that Paul Hernandez from Sanger and Theresa helped host a number of months ago around some of the strategies that they were using with Listenwise and distance learning. And we heard this outpouring of support from our customers who said, we want more, we want to go deeper. And so I talked with Theresa about this potential idea, and of course, because it's Theresa, she jumped right on it and agreed to lead this. So I just want to say thank you again, and I will turn it over to you, Theresa. This is really your show and Sanger's show, and thanks to everyone for being here.
Thank you, Adam, for that introduction. And just to kind of say that we are in this together, and I know that it's been quite a journey since we had to close schools down with our pandemic. And so I wanted to introduce myself. My name is Theresa Blanchard. I am an EL program specialist in Sanger Unified, and I am so privileged to work with so many amazing colleagues, both in our district and surrounding us, and all the way across the country, all the way in Boston with our Listenwise colleagues as well. So this past spring, I know everyone had to add a few extra hats to their collection. For me, I was hired as a kindergarten and second grade dual language teacher for my kids. So I know that the adjustment and the timing of everything, trying to get teachers and our community and parents onto virtual learning platforms was strenuous and stressful, and we were trying to do all of that while balancing full-time jobs and things like that. So I wanted to give you a chance in the chat if you wanted to add in, as we do some other introductions, what other hats did you add to your collection, or did you wear in this spring, and even now, maybe even entering this new fall season. We want to introduce our, on the next slide, our Sanger Unified team, who's also on the line. So I'm going to ask them to unmute themselves as I kind of introduce them, and then if there's anyone else from the Listenwise team, add them after that, and then just welcoming our guests from other districts and our friends that we've made along the way. So our Sanger Unified team today, behind the scenes that are running, who's running the slide deck for me, is Jason Locke. Jason, would you introduce yourself?
I think my mic's off. Hello, how's it going, everybody?
I can hear you, Jason. Great. Thank you. Jason is the EL curriculum support provider at our comprehensive high school. And then we have Paul Hernandez, who Adam mentioned. He was able to provide a webinar a few weeks ago about supporting English learners with Listenwise in the secondary classroom. Paul, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi all, I'm Paul Hernandez. I'm a social science and ALD educator at Sanger High School, and I'm good to be back and share some more information.
And then we also have on the line Rhonda Tyler, our elementary CSP and ELSite contact from one of our elementary schools, Jefferson Elementary. Rhonda, would you like to say hello?
Hello.
And they will be helping add in some site perspective and give you some reflections as well as we present what we tried back in the spring and what we plan to adjust for the fall coming up. There are other Sanger Unified ELSite contacts on here, as well as community members, and I want to just welcome you all. And then give Adam, is there anyone else from the Listenwise team that you'd like to introduce?
Yeah, that would be great. I also realized I omitted, I wanted to thank our partners over on the East Coast in Philadelphia. I see Donna Scherer on the line as well. Donna, thanks for joining. from the East Coast as well. So I realized I forgot you. And I want to intro our founder and CEO, Monica Brady-Myrov, who has joined me as well. Monica, you want to say hi?
Yeah, hi everyone, and a special thank you to you, Theresa, to see you again. You were so kind to host me just last fall when life was normal, and I was able to visit Sanger and you and talk about how we can partner together even more deeply. And then I was really honored to be invited into Paul's class and see him using Listenwise with his students, and hear a lot of great stories that I've just really reflected on a lot since then. And then to have a chance with Paul and I and you, Theresa, to run a webinar a few weeks ago, as Adam referenced, that was just a huge hit. I mean, there's so much we need to do to help our English learners, and we're proud to be partnering with Sanger to do that. So thanks so much for having us today.
Thank you, Monica. I appreciate the opportunity. You may be hearing the doorbell be allowing other people to join us as we go through, and Jason will go ahead and get started here. I did add the slide link to the chat. If others request it, feel free to recopy and paste that in as needed. Let's see if we have, there it goes. Okay, so the big question that Adam and I and the team have been kind of grappling with is, even back in the spring, how are we going to adjust our face-to-face instructional routines and be able to serve our students in the digital format? And what we want to do is explore today with you a chance to tell you about what we were planning to replicate from this spring, and then what we're going to hopefully be able to change and improve to better serve our students. To give you some context, for our EL population for our district, we're going to share some data here. So our site, all of our sites, we have 14 elementary sites, and we have, I'm going to go ahead and pull up my slides over here. Jason, go ahead and move to the next slide for me. We have 12,635 students that we had when we closed our schools last spring. So we're adding a few of our students this fall, and obviously we're all going through registration right now and trying to figure out, which format of learning we will be starting in the fall with our governor's announcements, and we'll talk about that in a moment. We also have about 13 to 14% of our student population who are English learners, so that's over 1,700, as well as 2,547 reclassified students. Sorry, Jason, one more back for the crowd.
This one?
Yes, that one. Thank you.
Okay.
We have 14 elementary sites, and then one comprehensive middle school. And then we also are opening a new high school. So we have a 9th grade cohort of students who are still connected to the comprehensive high school, but we're growing a secondary, another kind of high school alongside our comprehensive high school. There are 3 alt ed sites, 3 charter schools, and 1 adult school. So just to give you some context on our population that we're serving. We also have been really trying to focus on the care before content. So on the next slide, we talk about the hierarchy of needs and the importance of really working with our whole team and our people services department to make sure that all the basic needs of our families and students are met before we can really talk about instruction. And I think that's really important to just remind everyone as we enter into the fall. There's a lot of trepidation and anxiety that our families and students are feeling, as well as our staff and teachers, that we're really needing to address as we explore our options for the fall semester. On the next slide, we have some information about the open registration that we allowed our families to consider from July 1st through July 17th. So we had on-campus options as well as off-campus options. And we were really excited to be able to get input from our families to see early on, before the governor obviously had shared information from his watch list just this last Friday. We wanted to provide a myriad of options that would better serve our families, whether it be on campus every day or off campus in a digital or distance learning format. So obviously everybody's been paying attention to their own parent surveys, and it's been, we call it the Corona coaster. On the next slide, you'll see a little graphic of that. And as of July 16th, 2020, we had 71% of our registration completed. As of yesterday, we had 80% of our registration for returning families completed. And the preference really before our governor had made his decision for about 80% of our counties and schools, we have daily attendance being kind of the #1 preference of what parents signed up as their first choice. And then 34% in the hybrid, where students would report to school about 2 to 3 days a week. We have Taft Online, which now is going to be site-based online as of last night at our special board meeting that we met with the board to discuss our plans for the fall. So 16% had actually selected that as their first choice. And then 6% had chosen a homeschool or Hallmark charter school to serve their families this coming back in this fall. So that's 78% that did want an on-campus option. And it's obviously out of our hands. With the next slide, you'll see with the governor's order last Friday and our Senate bill updates with Senate Bill 98 that was updated earlier in June. And our new standard operating procedures, which is a flexible living document that keeps evolving with our leadership team. So on the next slide, Jason, you can see the county, obviously the dashboards and the watch lists being updated by our state, and we're paying careful attention to those changes so that we can morph our plans accordingly. We have on a lot of the documents that we've been building, we have some flexibility between the different stages, but no matter what kind of context that we find ourselves in, or what context you may find yourselves in, we really want to make sure that we prioritize our high need students, including our English learners, and then we schedule and protect those required services. And one of those required services that we want to focus on today is designated ELD, because that needs to be considered core for English learners, and it's not always considered that when we talk about instruction and lessons and planning for the school year. So we're really trying to make sure that with our leaders and with our teams, we're emphasizing the importance of the designated ELD, and that we're asking for evidence of when and how it's going to be provided. So with that big question and thinking about EL services and support, our big question that we didn't really feel like we had a good grasp on was assessment. In the spring, obviously, we weren't able to give the LPAC in the spring, so that was a big data kind of gap that we've created that we have been using to monitor progress towards language proficiency for our students. But we really want to come back in the fall and provide targeted instruction and intervention, as well as identify reclassification candidates. So we'll be sharing a little bit about how we did that and what we're planning to do and communicate. Two kind of reminders, and this visual was adapted from Ventura County Office of Education when we had worked with them for our elite training with our leadership teams. And this kind of graphic has stuck with us for a while now, because it really helps illustrate that when we're saying designated ELD, we're truly focusing on the language and the ELD standards, but content should be there and it should be connected to those lessons as well, versus integrated ELD when the content is the focus, but there needs to be then those language support. So this visual has been kind of a foundational piece of understanding that we're attaching all this new information and these new recommendations to. With designated ELD, again, really reinforcing on the next slide, you'll see that designated ELD is required. But what we didn't do well in the spring was really differentiate between what synchronous ELD should and can look like versus asynchronous. Now, synchronous could be a lot of different things, right? We have live lessons, whether it be Google Meet or Zoom or whatever platform your district uses. Phone calls and check-ins, which I know our secondary team will be sharing a little bit later, that phone calls actually work better than scheduled meetings. Now this might look different if if we can and will take attendance, and that, you know, there's going to be some other expectations coming into this fall that we didn't have in the springtime, but that there should be some sort of synchronous or live lessons where modeling can happen in small groups or strategic groups with students by proficiency level, or in mixed groups where students can build fluency and hear that language modeled by their teacher and get the feedback that they need. Now, ELD cannot be just asynchronous, but you can, and I know that the state has started to put out some distance learning expectations and recommendations where it can be a mix of both, right? So synchronous should be given, and then asynchronous opportunities for students to practice using their language. It could be possibly that you're sending students some videos to review, whether the teacher, you know, created it themselves or they're pulling from the internet with our growing kind of resource collection out there. Or if they're checking in again by text message, phone, or things like Remind. We put out a series of choice boards, and those were adapted and used by many districts actually, and sites across our district, depending on where teachers left off. So we didn't want to necessarily say you have to use exactly these choice boards, because we definitely want to honor our teachers as professionals and give them a chance to adapt the lessons and the choice boards and activities that they feel best meet their students' needs, and reinforce the language skills that those students need next. As well as generating some paper pencil options, because we knew that right when we had to transition in the spring, not everyone had access to our online components, and we worked very hard as a district to make sure that devices got to families and students' hands, including access to Wi-Fi and internet. And then the reading logs, journals, there's a lot of other options that asynchronous could be. And we kind of played with this and got feedback from our teams, but the big four that's on the right-hand margin also came from our Ventura County Office of Education Friends with the big four that should be kind of used to protect designated. These things still apply, right? So we need to make sure that designated ELD is on the schedule, even in a virtual format, since most of us will be entering the fall with a virtual setting. We want to try to, as much as possible, group our students by proficiency or language level. We do know that some grouping across proficiency levels, has to happen because we don't always have the staffing or the time, but as much of different proficiency levels as possible to provide the right scaffolding and support and modeling, as well as a focus on those ELD standards and making it as interactive and engaging as possible. Here's an example of what those choice boards looked like. And if you visit sangerlearns.com, we do have those available from the spring. And there's templates available for modifying. We know that there are a lot of different adaptations that have been made based on, what, again, the teachers and PLCs wanted to focus on for students and the language that needed to be taught. So these choice boards is an example more of those asynchronous lessons, and they are again available on sangerlearns.com on the ELD page. And we'll be sharing a couple other things too that we're going to be adding to our instructional curriculum offerings for this fall. The next slide, we have kind of our question again, and I'm going to open this up to our elementary and secondary teams as well to add in some reflections. I kind of wanted to give you a little bit of the background of what the district was trying to support our sites with and communicate to our sites as well. So the question that I asked the team was, how did we adjust our face-to-face instruction routines and strategies to meet the diverse needs of our English learners in that distance learning environment? And we're going to be entering again back into this environment. So we wanted to open it up, obviously, and discuss, what did we learn? And then what are we planning to replicate that worked well? Because we do know some things worked well. So one thing that we noticed right away is that there were lots of offerings with webinars, right? So we had some really amazing, leaders in the EL field out there on Twitter, through, remote webinars, and they were sharing some really amazing things. Sometimes it was just on remote teaching or learning. So here's an example from Larry Ferlazzo up in Sacramento, where we weren't grading, right? We wanted to hold students harmless, but that's going to look different this fall. Social emotional learning, we needed to make sure that our students were feeling okay, that they were okay, that they were able to navigate this transition. We wanted to minimize synchronous learning in the spring, but also be mindful about how that will adjust in the fall, coming back into a more structured routine where attendance will be taken and grades will have to be provided somehow. Trying to keep it simple, knowing that not one size fits all, and then offering grace, flexibility, and the ability to pivot, which have been 3 emerging themes from our district. So I'm going to let Rhonda Tyler kind of join in the conversation and share a couple things that she and her team learned with remote learning.
Yeah, piggyback on what Theresa was saying as far as flexibility and giving yourself grace. When we first went to remote learning or distant learning, it was phone calls are definitely the mode of the day. That's what kind of got us going. But as our big takeaways were, even though most staff was comfortable with the tech, we realized quickly that not all stakeholders were comfortable with the tech. So you had parents were really stressed out about how do I access this, and kids that were at site were totally comfortable with tech. When they went home, when they finally got one-to-one, it was like they had never seen the iPad a day in their life. So you kind of had a little bit of those growth spurts of having to deal with that. So having support and scaffolds for everybody. So the teachers needed scaffolds because there were even some teachers that struggled because that one-to-one side-by-side is different than when it's virtual. So just having access and providing scaffolds and it not being interrupted. That was our big, because it was constantly getting calls. I tried this app, it's not working. Can you fix it? I did this, it's not working. Can you help me? So troubleshooting in the beginning, all those apps were absolutely driving us. Well, they were driving us nuts, to be frankly honest. The other thing is the students, like Theresa said about a social emotional, our students, giving them voice to give feelings of whether they were positive or negative. Some of them were positive. Oh, I'm getting more time to myself. I'm doing really good. But then there were some kids who didn't. But giving them, like within the logins, to journal what they were feeling, gave them that voice that they needed to positive or negative, what they were experiencing. That was very important and effective for us. And the next thing that was really big, and by the way, I did an infographic. I don't know if you did notice that. That was kind of my thinking process. The other thing that we noticed was the structure needs to be in place for it to be effective impacting. Not only do we need to give time for our kids, but we had to calendar it. I think at first we did do the phone calls, but in elementary, them knowing when they have to meet, help the parents fix their schedules, help the kids fix their schedules, and then the time. And then the last thing was flexibility. We had to be flexible because if we didn't give ourselves grace, you were going to have a lot more emotional issues to deal with. So having that flexibility really helped us out. What we're definitely going to replicate is using a variety of apps and programs to differentiate the instruction. Google Classroom was obviously a big one. Listenwise was definitely a big one, through Nearpod, through Edpuzzle. Listenwise we used kind of as our platform to divvy out into other basically app smashing so that we could really service more of our ELs. The other thing is asynchronous and synchronous. I never thought I'd know those words, but now I do. Those are definitely going to be, we basically started off with asynchronous with the choice boards, which was very helpful because we came back to group and we talked about, okay, so what are you going to decide as a grade level? What's going to work with your kids? What is a good way for you to have your ELs express their language, what they can bring to the table? But then also the live, because then, like Theresa said, the modeling that our teachers can give our kids in the Google Meets was really important. So kind of balancing both of those is what we're definitely going to be replicating. We need more intervention. Our RTI team, along with ELs, we were both at the same table going, okay, so how can we support our ELs through RTI? So because our population is more ELs, we are more impacted for this, parents are working in the fields. We just have more things that we have to kind of take into consideration. So we want to make sure that we continue to provide more intervention for our struggling kids for ELs for next year. And then the flexible grouping, just making sure that, if a kid needs it to be small, he or she can have it small. If they want to talk to the teacher to practice. And then if they wanted it in a large group, and then it to be scheduled. Scheduling for us was a big deal. We couldn't just do the phone calls. The phone calls in the beginning were fine, but as time went on, we were working 24/7 and we needed some, sleep. So we had to schedule time. So this is when we're meeting. This is when you're doing it. This is when you're having intervention. So then everybody stayed sane. So those were kind of our learning points.
Thank you, Rhonda, for sharing that. We're going to go ahead and give our secondary team a chance as well to share. And I'm not sure, too, Paul, if Angelique is on the line and willing to share as well, but she's an important part of our ALD or academic language development team at the high school.
Absolutely. I think she's online, and I would definitely invite her to. She's a great colleague and was a big part of what we did. So, Angelique, if you're on, definitely hop in and share a few things. Jason, if you can go back a few slides where the 7 tips of remote teaching. This is just a great visual. One of the reasons why Sanger has had some success is, we've kind of hit each one of these as we were going through our distant learning, and all of these come back to putting our kids first. So everything we've been doing so far is trying to figure out a way to make our students successful. So it did put a little extra pressure on us teachers, but again, we were all for it. So going to what we learned, we were gonna encounter many obstacles that sometimes we really couldn't control. A lot of stuff that we couldn't control. So anything from our students having access to the internet or a problem with their iPad. Luckily Sanger is a district with 1-to-1 iPad for each student, so it's a benefit there. But we still had some technology issues, motivation, or just even structure at home. We encountered each one of these, so we had to figure out how to find success and overcome these obstacles, and we were able to. We also found that if we kept our lessons and our structure to really simple, really something that a student can log on and access and learn, would create the most success. Because we also had to think about our students are going through not just our class, not just our ALD or ELD class, but they have 5 or 6 others they have to worry about, and we wanted to make sure that they weren't stressed out about our class, but they were just learning. They were gaining something that they can move on possibly to their other classes. Again, just like our elementary schools, we had to reach out regularly. We scheduled Zoom meetings, and the attendance wasn't where it needed to be. So we found that making phone calls directly to students and parents was the best, and we'll definitely do that upcoming, when it rolls around again. Okay, I don't want to ramble on too much. Angelique, if you're on.
I'm here, Paul.
All right.
The big thing was really just making that time to reach out with them. And I think we're really planning for this fall with the development of the synchronous time piece to be able to really solidify that and to make sure that we're meeting that need in person, as well as kind of cleaning up our one-to-one, because with our ALD program, it's been really crucial to be able to provide kind of that one-on-one with students, both developing their language in our class, but also helping them with their other classes as well, was a major piece of what we're trying to do with our ALD program. And, talking about keeping it simple, really it was creating a choice board, putting in all the links that they needed, whether it was a Listenwise activity or any other activity that we were doing with them. All they had to do was just click it. And it was we tried to make it as simple as possible for them. And so we're very thankful for those different apps that allow us to keep it as simple as possible.
There was a question if we're using English 3D, and we are currently using English 3D. We've been using it the past 2 years, and we are now planning and still figuring out a way if we're going to be able to use it for this next fall, as we're, as it'll be a little bit different, but we are planning to use it. What we're planning to replicate, we want to use in the future. Just like Angelique describing our choice boards, that was one of the main things that I think was very successful, is giving our students a choice or options on how they want to complete a particular assignment. And now we're going back, we're using Canvas and setting it up so students are able to, complete lessons, keeping it simple, and then again, using these different apps and programs to reach them online.
Now, with our curriculum and our stance in Sanger Unified, we are a standards-driven district, not a curriculum-driven district. So what our team has really done a great job of is trying to deconstruct and use the viable pieces of English 3D and Listenwise, and just kind of almost, and I think Rhonda mentioned it, like app smash it together. So like curriculum smashing might be a new thing. I don't know, we just made that up. So we have the ability to take the things and the pieces that work to reinforce the listening, the speaking, the reading, the writing, and the ELD skills and language skills that students need based on our ELD standards. So I know people have been asking about, even in their district still, like, what curriculum are we going to be using? And it's a little bit more complicated than that, because a really good curriculum is not a one-size-fits-all silver bullet package. So we're really trying to explore other options and though make it as simple as possible, especially for new teachers to come on board. So we've been doing some development with Canvas courses this summer, and we'll be sharing some resources as we go. We did want to give a shout out again to Listenwise on the next slide, and just give a couple examples of how we can use something like Listenwise with the intention of originally supporting English learners with listening comprehension. We've been able to find lots of flexible ways to be able to support students and use the program. So I'm going to let Paul kind of talk through a couple of these learnings.
Yeah, absolutely. So Listenwise is a great way to, remotely teach, challenge, and even assess listening skills. We found many of our students struggled in that area. So the past few years, we've been integrating Listenwise, not just in our English or EL or ALD classes, but just across the board, and we've seen a lot of success. A couple reasons is Listenwise is a great program where you can adjust maybe a level or even a lesson for each student, and obviously for each class. So that was a big challenge that we found. We found something that we could teach with, like maybe a video, but with Listenwise, you're able to use these different functions, scaffolds, and options to really push each student. So a couple things. Sorry, I lost you there. When using Listenwise, we can use it, or we've used it in the past in class, and we're going to be able to use it all online. So if our district is going to go back to strictly online, we're going to still be able to use it. And it's just they're great real world connections. So you can pretty much think of any topic that you'd want to teach, or something very interesting to the particular student that you have, and you can customize each lesson. You can find a way to really to integrate it and fit the needs for your students. Teresa, I don't know how in depth we wanted to go. Do you want me to kind of go step by step on how we use it?
What we could do is maybe get into more details at the end, because we want to make sure we get through all of our slides. But I know Ephraim from Selma asked about Listenwise working well with emerging English learners. Can you kind of give some differentiation or scaffolding examples?
Can I actually jump in on that one, Paul?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay. So as a world language teacher, I also have experience listening to difficult text sometimes. And Listenwise has a wide range of audio selections, right? So you have some really simplified, easier to comprehend listening selections, but then it grows in complexity. But the great things with the transcripts, you have access to so many things that can help students of all levels. And in world language, we often talk about, edit the task, not the text. And so really you can take any text or audio selection and just simplify what it is that you're asking of the students to do with that selection. So whether that's, beginning students all the way through, kind of students that are ready to reclassify.
Awesome. Thank you, Angelique, and thank you, Paul. We're going to go ahead and keep moving, and we'll be able to share kind of some other options and plans that we have coming into the fall semester. And the next slide, we just, ask the question again, how are we going to adjust our face-to-face instructional routines and strategies? But also, what specifically are we going to change and do differently?
Hey, Theresa.
Yes.
To go back to e-fighting's question, actually, our newcomer teacher actually uses Listenwise in her class. She, as Angelique said, she selects the text that she deems appropriate and scales it down based off Lexile level and stuff like that and listen level, and allows them to do multiple listens to go through it. So it does help them out, and it does expand their academic English in other classes too.
Perfect. Thank you so much for adding that, Jason. I appreciate it. So with our kind of this next section of slides, I'm just going to highlight a couple things because we talked about trying to not just meet compliance, but also build capacity of our team and our teachers as we entered kind of these uncharted territory or this uncharted territory. So we really want to improve and increase equity and access for our English learners specifically. So we're really looking carefully at instruction curriculum. I know a lot of you, when you had signed up, asked about the differences between integrated and designated. And today we're focusing more on designated, but we have a couple resources and slides that'll highlight some good strategies really that can be used in that integrated setting. Defining what synchronous lessons really do look like and trying to create some district cohesion and consistency is our goal coming into the fall, as well as just improving those asynchronous independent activities. So things like our choice boards, making sure that those are relevant to the skills and adjusted to the skills that students need to practice in between those synchronous lessons or check-ins with their teacher. We also want to use data and assessment, strategically. So we have been working also with partners like Elevation, and we sent out a teacher input form this last spring. So of those teacher input forms, we have about 100 students that have been recommended for reclassification or as a reclassification candidate that we need to prioritize for testing this fall. We also have about, I think it was 500 to 600 students that were English learners in the spring that teachers said are going to need some additional support. And then the other students have been making adequate progress. So the teachers felt like they didn't need to be accelerated or recommended for intervention or prioritized for testing with LPAC, hopefully coming this fall with our digital setting. And then we have, just a need in our district for formative assessments. So we've been on the hunt for, more options that really assess our ELD standards. And it's not just an ELD assessment that has been around for a while and was stamped, ELD standard 2012 when we made that transition. So we're really trying to make sure that we're choosing our assessments carefully, or we're really analyzing what speaking and language samples even that teachers are collecting over time to make adjustments to their instruction. And then we'll be sharing a little bit about homeschool connections and some recommendations as well. So we are moving into obviously distance learning for all sites this next fall, as of yesterday with our special board meeting and Friday's governor's announcement. So that means that integrated ELD will be provided virtually with language modeling and supports. And we'll kind of give some examples in a moment about what that could look like, as well as designated ELD. So what we want to do is see a blend of synchronous and asynchronous activities and lessons. So at least 2 20 to 30 minute lessons is what we're asking our teachers per week. Now that could be a phone call, it could be one-on-one, it could be small group. We're not defining the group, but we definitely want to see some synchronous lessons and check-ins happening, as well as strategic or intentional asynchronous assignments. So that could be in the form of choice boards. It could be in the form of like, even activities that change by week, like talk about a scene or things that match maybe even the LPAC. But we want to offer then more in-person lessons and support for our emerging or newcomer students, and as well as our struggling English learners, especially once we notice if students are struggling with their integrated content courses. We want to make sure we scaffold and support them accordingly. We're constantly going to be looking at data and assessments to group students and customize instruction, as well as assess and exit our FEP candidates that were identified in the spring, right as teachers were leaving for the summer. So we have that list ready to go, as well as then assessing our new English learners with our initial LPAC and placing them accordingly. But all of this will be done through our EL site contact. So we have one person assigned per site that is paid a stipend that they're responsible for monitoring and supporting English learner services and instruction at the site. So as a district EL program specialist, I work directly with EL site contact, sharing information like this, sharing webinars and resources, and then they share with their own teachers and staff. So that's kind of the layers of support that we've been able to create to serve in this format. We're going to quickly go through slides 24 and 25 because these expectations is what we'll move into if we then can slowly start making our way back to the daily in-person attendance. So a couple adjustments. Most of it is the same, but we really want to make sure that our students are grouped strategically. Then if we get a chance to have them on campus, we want those synchronous lessons to be happening on campus in person when possible. And then the next slide, we'll talk about the difference with then on campus. So once we go back to on campus, the expectation that we have as a district on slide 25 is that we want to see at least 100 minutes per week for TKK because we know that they have fewer minutes available compared to our 1st through 12th grade students. So we have 150 minutes per week set as a minimum expectation for designated ELD. And students should be grouped by proficiency level or course, and course placement obviously is made by assessment data and proficiency levels as well. So that's the major difference between what we're going to be kind of recommending between on and off or a hybrid setting. So I wanted to share those recommendations. As well as the next 2 slides are links to West Ed recommendations, where again, some of the themes that we're seeing here, so we need to boost the synchronous and define the synchronous learning time, kind of making sure that teachers understand what that can and should look like, offering structures for student collaboration, and taking advantage of the digital apps and learning platforms that we have to create small groups and create opportunities for students to interact with each other. And then getting students again to be able to talk in depth and explore and make meaning of the content that they're learning, especially in the integrated setting. And then really focusing on reading and writing and building for us to speaking and writing products. So we really want to spiral and scaffold those language skills and really collect then as many speaking and writing samples as possible, and then monitor what students are doing with reading and how they're growing as a reader. The next slide came from Support Ed, and I saw this, I think originally on Twitter, and then I kind of had to hunt down the original source, so it is linked if you click on the picture. These are the advantages and disadvantages for English learners in the different types of cyber learning. So again, defining synchronous versus asynchronous. Our choice boards really only apply in that synchronous kind of column. So we're really wanting to add in that top layer where we can model social cues and language for students, that there's more interaction, again, with a live or virtual lesson versus students working at their own pace, and trying to create as much as possible some student-to-student interaction and modeling as well. With our designated ELD and distance learning explorations, we've been working with experts in the field and our consultant, Dr. Armando Zuniga, who's also joining us as well. And he put out an article that's linked in the credits at the end of this slide section. But we found that, trying to take the best of, what works with distance learning and the best of, what works for ELD and English learners, and try to, again, smash that information and find those commonalities. So what we kind of came up with were these 5 areas that we want to really zoom in on and try to improve. So really identifying and planning with language demands in mind. So what do our students need language-wise, and how can we facilitate that in the integrated and designated setting? Also is paying careful attention to vocabulary instruction and making sure that it's included, but that's not the sole purpose of designated. That is not just a vocabulary lesson building time, but we really want teachers to strategically help students make meaning and learn new vocabulary words, both academic and domain specific, as well as use those new vocabulary words in context. Doing a lot with activating prior knowledge and using visual cues and multimedia strategically, as well as, again, opportunities to increase student output and be able to share that speaking and writing products with other peers and students. Now, this section, just what we wanted to do is continue to build capacity and explain how we plan to build capacity in our district, and kind of allow you to reflect on what organizational structures you have, and how communication information flows and updates. So one thing that we are very lucky to have is an ELSite contact at every site, and I've linked the checklist that we have, and I need to update it and add some obviously distance learning pieces here, so that we're in the process of that. One thing that we changed on slide 31 was our EL meetings in a memo, because obviously we couldn't meet together, and that's what we used to do, is meet in person face-to-face at least once a month for a training or a meeting update. So we have our EL meetings in a memo with bookmarks to links and updates and presentations that we had to move into a virtual parking lot. So we kind of put our brakes, I guess, essentially with this car metaphor. We put the brakes on our ELSite contact memo, and we created this virtual parking lot for our ELSite contacts to share resources and have access to all the up-to-date LPAC live updates as we were canceling the assessment and trying to plan for closing out the school year. So that was really, really helpful for communication, and I've linked those. So if you wanted to see a sample of what those reflections and updates look like, that you can explore that. We also want to make sure we continue to work with our other English learner stakeholders, which include our leadership team, our principals, our gen ed teachers, our SPED teachers and support staff, as well as our pupil services staff and our data team. Parents need to be treated as partners. So that's a group that we're really trying to make sure that we have in mind as we're entering into the fall, as well as students. And I'm humbled that Paul, one of our teachers, is obviously echoing the fact that we want to put students in the forefront as we're planning to reopen schools this next month. And then any other stakeholders, obviously, that interact with English learners. A couple of things that we had noted on slide 33, which was homeschool communications, or connections and communication. We want to make sure that we support our multilingual families, and we have a growing dual language population. That is a great reminder to our district that we need to make sure that we translate documents and we treat our families with care and communicate as best as possible in the language that they understand. But we want to make sure, again, we're attending to social, emotional, and basic needs of our families and students, and we communicate openly and often. We use translation tools strategically and make sure that we utilize our support staff, especially those that speak the native language of our families that we're serving to, reach out to them and use them to make phone calls and check-ins as well. And then honoring and encouraging the use of home language during this time, especially when we were in the spring, to make sure that no matter what the language students are reading, no matter what the language students are speaking with their families and using language and making those connections. We also have a couple, things that we're going to be working on is, keeping our eye on how we can pull in from that California EL roadmap, the assets-oriented language, the needs-responsive schools. There's a lot of great reminders. In fact, on the next slide, the self-reflection rubric as well, that we want to remind our principals and leaders that we can keep moving across this continuum. We're not expecting everybody is going to be at a level 4 of implementation on all of these items, but we do need to take time to reflect and move across each area that is of greatest need. So we're going to continue to do that. And also we're going to be updating our EL master plan, which is part of our building capacity beyond compliance. And this is the new format of our chapters. We've moved program evaluation to FPM, some of the legal stuff from the beginning to the end to really get to the heart of what our students need and what our sites need to make this a really user-friendly document. So on slide 37, here's the purpose of our master plan update. And we also were magically selected to be federally program monitored, or FPM, this year. So we're starting in the fall with digital learning, and we're going to be going through an FPM, but this is a great time to really make sure that we do this work right and build a shared understanding of our programs and services that match and align with the EL roadmap and all the other great documentation from the state, and try to create as much of a user-friendly document for all of our stakeholders as possible. So what's new in that would be a COVID-19 section. And again, we're going to continue to share as much resources as they become available to us and as we have time to kind of organize them through this EL master plan and on Sanger Learns. As we have a couple more minutes, I didn't want to take up too much of that time, but I want to give our elementary and secondary team again a chance to share some of the things that they're going to be doing differently. So Rhonda, I know we're doing some Canvas course development, and we're trying to create a designated ELD lesson menu for those synchronous lessons to kind of define and give teachers ideas on what that could look like. Is there anything you want to add to that as well?
No, just that, like you said, it's in progress. We're trying to make it to where it's user friendly for designated and integrated, as well as synchronous and asynchronous as well. The menu is very, we tried to make it as user friendly as possible so that all grade levels K-12 could use it. We had a lot of people that worked really hard trying to keep everybody, all our ELs in mind when we were creating it. And it's definitely something, and I think Theresa shared a link, I think, at the end.
This is a sample of that.
Yeah, that's definitely something that we would love for you to take a look at. I think like it's not where we want everything yet, but it's definitely a step in the right direction, as Theresa said. And we're excited about it. We're excited to see what kind of results we get out of it and where we're going to go with it as a site and at district as well.
So our goal is to try to create one per grade level. We have TKK showing here, and if you click on it, it'll take you to the document. This is the second part of that, so you can see by ELD standard, what is the standard at the bridging level, and how can we scaffold emerging students on the left-hand margin, as well as really defining what synchronous versus asynchronous activities can look like for that specific standard. And we really encourage our teachers to try to group standards together, especially link it with the content, again, that they're learning in integrated. So this hopefully will give them a chance to see not just using those choice boards only as designated, but really trying to find and pick the strategic synchronous lessons that students need next that are standards based. So that's what's coming, a little preview of what's going to be launched for Sanger Learns in the next couple weeks. We'll keep you posted. Secondary team, is there anything you'd like to add for input and reflections as we enter into the fall?
We still plan to use Canvas. We've been spending a lot of time putting together a course all through Canvas. And pretty much we just want to have, really clear expectations for the students, what we expect from day one throughout the entire time on as we use Canvas all online. Again, we wanted to take a lot of where we were successful this past year and just kind of find a way to be creative, but still be keeping it simple for our students to be successful in the fall.
Yeah, and then the other thing we're really looking at is for the synchronous piece, like Theresa was saying, is we really want to have a good plan for that and to make the most of that time, especially to work on their speaking, which there are ways to make that happen in asynchronous, but it's just having that direct feedback with them in that synchronous model, I think is more beneficial. So I think we'll be making the most of what we can with that synchronous time.
Thank you, Angelique and Paul. And so one of the last bullet points there too is one thing that we have to do differently is make sure that we have an opportunity to reclassify the students that are ready to be reclassified. So making sure we strategically use the assessment data that we have available and the data that we have available to make those decisions that are obviously recommended by the state and in alignment. We're working really hard to see if there's anybody that we may have missed that we can make sure that are placed in the courses that they need and not held back in any way as far as equity and access goes. With that in mind, we're going to wrap up. I know we hit 1 o'clock, but we're planning on staying on a couple more minutes to answer any questions that we may have missed in the chat and address any questions that you might have. We want to invite you to visit the ELD page on sangerlearns.com, where we will be adding those ELD lesson menus that we've been working on this summer. As well as the slides. I'll probably put the recording to this webinar there. And I know, Adam, you've sent out all the confirmation emails, so we can definitely send access to the slides and the recording as a follow-up. Is there anything that you would like to add, Adam, or anyone else from the team?
Thanks, Theresa. I just wanted to thank you so much again to you personally and for everyone's input from Sanger today. Paul and Angelique and Jason and Rhonda. This was just such a wonderfully productive session, and I really feel that we were able to share so much for our peer districts and really around building capacity. And I think one of the challenges that I often hear from our partners is, well, what are others doing in getting this group together across not just the state but across the country is such a pleasure, and I just wanted to say thank you. And to follow up, I will be sharing a link to the slides, the webinar recording, and we also want to send out, just as a thank you for attending, a little Starbucks gift card. So in my follow-up email with the link to the slides and to the recording, I'm just going to ask if you might be able to share a mailing address so we can send you a little Starbucks gift card, a little coffee on us. It's supposed to be a lunch and learn. It's going to be a little coffee and learn. So thank you.
I put in the chat, just a thank you from me and the rest of the team for joining us. We wanted to hopefully leave a little bit of time at the end to take questions, but we were again happy to stay on a little bit longer and answer any other questions that we may have missed. So feel free to unmute yourself and or add any questions to the box. And thank you, Adam, for the coffee. That's very, very generous of you and your team. So thank you for that.
Hi, Theresa. This is Dee Dee.
Hi, Dee Dee.
How are you? Hi there. So I mentioned, or I'm saying, one of you mentioned about giving feedback, and that has been something that I've been dabbling with. So I'm wondering if you have a model for feedback that you're implementing, or has that not been worked out yet?
So feedback is definitely something that we need to work on as a district that I've noticed as a coach. And we have some kind of like sentence frames and language frames that we've used, as well as tools like the conversation analysis tool from Jeff Swears and the Stanford Understanding Language team have been offering some really great kind of resources to give feedback to students based on what teachers are observing during their conversations. But for me, I think what I've learned is trying to look at those standards carefully and figure out, what skills are you looking for, and to regurgitate some of that that standard language to the student and model accordingly if students are close, or there needs to be some adjustment in the language that they're using when they're speaking or writing. And I think that's the thing, is we talk a lot about input and output in our district because it's a little bit more simplified. So the listening and the reading kind of domains are more on that input, right? It's how students are using and getting the language and the content. I'm sorry, not using language, that they're getting the content, right? So then the output is how they're using their language through speaking and writing. And that's where you can really collect evidence of how their comprehension is developing and other things. So it's getting teachers to be more aware and to zoom in and pay attention to those moments when we can hear them speak and or see and look in their writing, to see those clues as far as, what and how can they improve to be more fluent, to be more proficient, or to be more playful, right? We don't want to just have our students regurgitate and fill in the blank sentences or paragraphs and not be able to contribute their original thought. So sometimes it's, about encouraging them to take a leap outside of the sentence frame or the scaffold that's being provided. So that looks, that looks very different depending on the levels of the students you're working with and what content you're working on. But I'd love to collaborate with you, Dee, a little bit more and decide and figure out how to improve feedback or that feedback loop to students, whether that's through speaking or writing.
Yes, I'll go ahead and touch base with you offline. I have a couple ideas, and I think they would mesh well together between what you said and what I'm thinking in my head. So
awesome. Look forward to that.
Okay, thanks.
All right. Any other questions that we missed? A lot of thank yous. We appreciate you being here and learning with us. We don't have this figured out at all, and we're doing the best we can and just trying to figure out, something that might work and how we can learn again from what we experience. So we encourage you and your teams to do that as well, just to do some reflection and think about, what worked well that you can replicate, and then what do you need to adjust that didn't work so well, because we're all doing the best we can. Team, did you see any other questions that came in?
Do we have a list of apps that we use?
Oh, yes. Jason, can you, let's see, I'm gonna actually share my screen and pull up. On Sanger Learns, we do have an online list, but I can show you what that looks like here for those of you who are interested. We've been trying to compile, and it actually reinforces the kind of philosophy of the input-output as well. I'm pressing all the wrong buttons, so hold on one second. We have on our Kinder example here, for every grade level, we're going to try to link as many grade-specific examples, but one thing that we have on the top of the page is something called recommended EL or online ELD resources. So we're going to kind of just give you a chance to see this here for those that are interested. And those of you who are leaving for the day, thank you again for joining us. You don't have to stay, but we're not kicking you out or anything. So we have the recommended online ELD resources link here, and that takes you to a document that we've also linked on Sanger Learns. But these are just some of the online ELD resources that work well for listening and reading, so that input, as well as the output for speaking and the output of writing. So we're trying to give some recommendations for especially that digital format. And then there's some really great language development apps and resources that we have been using, but some of them require licensing. So just kind of make sure we pay attention to that. and then some content vocabulary apps and websites. So I'll share a link to this document in the chat, as well as some great people to follow on Twitter. I know Efrain is here, and he's been someone that we definitely respect and enjoy collaborating with, that is always looking for some really great online resources. So I'm going to go ahead and put that link to our online resources that I just shared. If I can get the right link here in a moment. Any other questions or thoughts or reflections? Any takeaways? Just waiting for my computer to load here.
Theresa, would you,
Oh, go ahead.
Would you mind if I put this out on Twitter, the presentation, or you already have plans to do that? I don't want to step on any toes.
You are welcome to share with colleagues. I'll be putting hopefully the recording of the screencast on our Sanger Learns webpage, so you can direct anyone there if they want more than just the slides.
Perfect. Thanks.
Yeah. Thanks, Dee Dee. Thank you for joining us, Armando. And as people kind of trickle out, we'll just kind of hang around and see if there's any other questions that come in. But thank you again, everyone, for joining us. We enjoy collaborating with all of you. And we look forward to learning alongside you as well, because this is going to be an interesting, growing experience for everyone. And we'll see with the federal program monitoring what the state thinks about our plan. So hopefully we can give you guys some learnings and feedbacks by the end of the year. But we're doing the best we can. Our team is putting some favorite apps in there. And if I missed any, we'll try to make sure we add those to the online ELD resources that we shared as well. It's an evolving list. Yes, Jason.
FPM is in the spring, correct?
Yes, so we have the in-person scheduled visit at this point, but we don't know if that's going to change at all. So we will be reviewed in the spring. We're going to be updating our EO master plan and trying to publish and get everything board approved by October, so that we can make sure we have everything in line and published well before our visit. And we want to get that updated anyway and in the hands of our sites as soon as possible. Thanks for that question, Amanda. My crew's coming back. They left for the hour to give me some uninterrupted internet and quiet time. So you may hear some co-stars and noise in the background. All right, we've got about 16 people left. Are there any other questions out there that we can address or discuss, or any other ideas or thoughts from the community? And if there's anything from our Sanger team that we forgot to mention or didn't have a chance to elaborate on, then this is a good opportunity to do that.
There was a question farther back up that asked about using English 3D as how it would be used online. I know that the high school doesn't have access to an online curriculum for English 3D, but I know that Paul and Angelique have also done an awesome job of adapting and taking the basic concepts and applying it towards whatever topics that they're moving forward with, so they're not reliant on the issues in the English 3D textbook, but rather taking the structures and applying them to the topics that they're using and moving forward that way. So it's not going to be a direct one-to-one match online.
Mm-hmm. I have an appointment set up hopefully soon. We're playing email tag right now with the English 3D contacts. So I want to make sure that for Course C, or the high school English 3D course. Last time we had checked, there wasn't online access for those materials, but we may have missed that update. So hopefully we can get you access if that access is available.
And to be honest, with the other problem that we've run into with English 3D is that it's only 8 issues. So dividing that up against 4 years, because we have to assume, I know we don't want to, but we have to assume that the kids are going to be with us for 4 years at worst case. We want to push them out sooner, but it's not always applicable to do that. So we have to kind of juggle, and we can't open book day one, close book year one, then start all the process all over again. So we need to be a little more strategic in what we do. What led to the freedom.
Mm-hmm. And Kathy's here. Hi, Kathy. She is going to be leading the FPM review in our district, and she said our FPM is scheduled in April. So we'll be having training, I think, in December. And Monica said best of luck, so we appreciate that. Thank you for, I think Dee Dee just left, but thank you for joining us again. If there are any other questions that we can answer, we are available through email as well. And on Sanger Learns, we'll be updating and adding the resources that we discussed and shared today. Just a few of those samples and highlights. I see Kelly's on here from our local EL group. And Lisa Clark from Fresno County office, or Fresno County Superintendent of Schools. Nice to see you, Lisa. Thanks for the feedback, Kelly. And Adam, again, I know we talked about you sending out follow-up emails. It seems like this is still recording, so I will check the recording and send you a link to that as soon as it's processed, and we can review and make sure that the quality and the sound is acceptable to share.
Perfect. That sounds great, and I'll start getting ready to share out the slides and some of the other resources. So thank you so much again, everyone, and it's so great to be here. So a treat.
And Lisa's actually enjoying lunch. Good for you, Lisa. I haven't eaten yet, so I'm planning to do that as soon as the call is over. Peanut butter and jelly sounds great. All right, so I think we'll go ahead and wrap this up, but I appreciate everybody spending their lunch with us today. And, again, we'll be in touch and we'll follow up with, our email from Adam. And again, Adam, thank you for being so generous with your Starbucks, and just your support and your time. We appreciate partners like you.
You're the best. We appreciate you. Okay. Thanks, everyone.
All right. Bye, everyone. Thank you.